Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Sorry for the brief delay in the start. This is Caitlin Sickles from the Policy Resolution Group at Bracewell, and I am joined today for this discussion by Paul Nathanson at Bracewell, Omar Nashashibi, and John Guzik with the Franklin Partnership. We are coming to you today for our, I believe, 5th webinar in this weekly series where we are giving you updates about the COVID-19 pandemic, its impact on the manufacturing industry across the country, and the latest updates from the federal and state level. You can find all of these materials, both the recording of the webinar, the slide deck that accompanies it, and other updates on our onevoiceinfo.org website. If we advance to the next slide, here's a little about us. Most of you know us by now, so I won't go through this. This is just information for folks who download this PowerPoint after the fact from the website.
Thanks, Caitlin. And this is John Guzik. Omar and I, are your team here in Washington with doing your lobbying for you. But as we proceed through this webinar, there is a question box. Feel free to ask a question of us. We will try to address it during our presentation. But if not, we will have time at the end of the webinar that we will answer any additional questions that you may have.
What we thought we would do here is, as we mentioned, we're just going to give an updates. These aren't going to be rehashing everything. Caitlin's got on the website. If you go on there, onevoiceinfo.org, scroll down, it says webinars, and she's got tiles by date for each of them. And so you can go back, and if you want to see any of the reference points, you'll get a better sense of where things currently stand. But again, we just want to give you the latest. We're at 95% of the current states, or current population rather, is on some kind of a lockdown. There have been some discussions, obviously, about reopening the country, so to speak. And with May 1st being the target, we have seen now New York push it back to May 15th, along with District of Columbia and a few other places. Looks like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan is working towards a May 1st reopening. Again, we'll see what that exactly means. The president's White House folks, so there were 2 different guidance put out, one that was leaked out on Tuesday by the CDC and the experts on how to reopen, and that was not accepted by the White House political folks. They wrote their other shorter 10-page one that a lot of folks said that there's not going to be a lot of meat to. So don't look at what the federal government's doing. You need to be focused clearly on your states. Those are the ones that are dictating this. The federal government does not have the authority. Article 10 of the Constitution provides it to the states to manage their own issues, anything not given to the federal government. So this will be done at the state level. We urge you to take a look at that and getting a better sense of where things stand. So again, focus on your local state and your local county. We don't want to interject a lot of politics, but we wanted to point out, again, reinforcing you need to be looking to the governors right now and your local county executives and commissioners. Those are the ones that are going to be making decisions before anything gets reopened. They're also the ones that are going to be enforcing the law down at the local level. So again, you must be in compliance with whatever's happening at the state level. And we thought this would be interesting. You start really with all the way left with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. He's literally doubled his approval rating since this thing began. And that's pretty amazing that even in the most dysfunctional states on which we've been working, which is Pennsylvania, even their governor has gone up. There's only one governor in the entire country who has seen his approval ratings go down. That's Ron DeSantis of Florida. So again, I think at this time you can get a better sense and reinforcement of where do you need to look to. We're not saying that they're better leaders or anything different, but the law still says you need to look towards the governors. They are the deciders in this case. Caitlin?
We included this slide because it gives you a really good sense, I think, of where the country stands on what is going to happen next, which is really where we're going to spend the most time on today's webinar. So this is from the Pew Research Center. They did a sample of the American public that is bipartisan. This data was actually reported both on MSNBC and on Fox in the last day. So I think it gives you a good sense of where people are feeling. The one I really want to focus on is that middle point where state governments will lift restrictions on public activity. The majority there, you're seeing 66% saying too quickly. And I share this information with you because it gives you a good sense of what your communities are feeling. A lot of manufacturers, of course, are very anxious to get back to work. Many of you are still working, and a lot of members have come to us and say, well, I'm concerned about backlash in my community, about, people perceiving us as, working when everyone else is shut down, or how do we advocate to get back to work? And we definitely want to help you with that messaging. And we'll talk later about our PR side, but I do want to flag for you that there is general country concern about states moving too quickly, and an overwhelming belief, nearly 75%, that the worst is still ahead of us here in the United States. So that is something that really we have to consider when we're considering the tone of our public communication and our advocacy efforts, which informs the work that, of course, Paul and I are doing, but also what John and Omar are doing.
Yeah, I think this is important, not because of the politics or anything like that. I think this is important because if this is what the general public is thinking, this is at least what the family members of your employees are thinking, at least 2/3 of them. So again, from communicating to your community, to your workers, to their families, keep in mind, this is apparently what they are thinking. And so you need to craft your message accordingly to be safe and be careful not to frighten them even more than they possibly already are. This, again, there's no change in the essential business definition at the federal level. This is the non-binding guideline that they've been providing, that they're encouraging states to use and adopt, and most of them have, only flagging it because nothing's changed there. But John, I think we've seen a kind of a turn. We heard from one of our One Voice members 2 Fridays ago today that he had a thermometer coming for his shop and their medical device manufacturer, and they got a notice from their vendor saying the government had redirected it. They can expect a delay about another 3 weeks till they actually get it. I don't know if they got it yet. So now we've seen that, John, I think also in Pennsylvania, and that's kind of a concern and where things stand.
Yeah, so states are starting to issue their own guidelines on how businesses should operate. And many states are moving forward with guidelines on specific masks. If you have a N95 mask that has expired, that is safer. Using that is safer than a surgical mask or a piece of cloth that covers your nose and mouth. And so that's a positive step moving forward. The state of Pennsylvania mandated that all employees who are working need to be wearing masks. But as Omar pointed out, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, the state of Pennsylvania basically confiscated all personal protective equipment from the private sector, wanted them to send it to the state. Yes, they would be reimbursed, and then the state would redistribute it. So now you've got your dentist offices and your manufacturers who may have had personal protective equipment in the facility that they had to turn over to the state government, and now the state comes out with their new rules saying, hey, everybody needs to have a mask. And so now you've got employers specifically in Pennsylvania waiting to get those masks.
And we're putting this up there to start letting folks know that this is going to likely continue to spread, especially as we start to, quote, reopen. There are going to be a number of businesses, some of you are already required to, depending on your state, to have some kind of a face covering. And so note that there have been some concepts that, yes, you can use a cloth mask in some environs, but note that you've got to have these employer provided in many cases, and increasingly we expect you to watch out for what those local requirements are. So for example, I think it's on the 19th at 8 p.m. Pennsylvania's got to start complying with this. New York has also got something not as tight as stringent. What OSHA's got up above is they're telling you don't use your N95. I mean, we were messing around on Amazon yesterday, and a lot of the masks that we would get when we were doing construction work, standing around the house, those are on a 10-day delay. So even just getting those. So even if your state does not have one, we would strongly advise you start looking into this. We've had a couple of tier 1s and OEMs start sending at least association staff and others their playbook for reopening or for future operations. We had one very large OEM said that they are planning on having 30 days worth of face masks in storage for each of their employees at each location. And so that indicates to us that they are preparing for some kind of a mandate, not just to spread, rather. I don't think it's as much prevention as it is preparation for a state mandate. And so that's something that we would, again, give you some advice to start planning ahead and talking to your HR staff of how you need to be prepared and what else is out there. A couple of things before we get to the 3P loan program on OSHA. This was on either Friday or Monday of this week. We're basically getting different updates and guidance documents between Treasury, IRS, SBA, OSHA, and CDC at least every day virtually. That's why it's important to check the website. But right now, OSHA is reporting that most complaints they've received have been mostly related to PPE not being either properly assigned or or they're expressing concern about the safe standards of their workplace. So note that they are starting. There was a Washington Post yesterday story that did enforce this, and we've been talking about it now for about 3 or 4 days. Watch though, they are not looking to do on-site inspections. They're classified you all in 3 different categories. They have high risk, that's obviously hospitals and those first responders. There are medium risks, and then there are low risk. So the lower risk, they effectively define that you're not in frequent contact within 6 feet of the general public. But again, the CDC guidelines want you to be 6 feet away in general, even when you're in the workplace. So note that it will not normally result in an on-site inspection, but you do need to respond. What they're going to rely on is what we call phone fax investigations. So they are going to send a follow-up if they receive a complaint, most likely from an employee that is, again, 66% feeling unsafe, 70 plus feeling worse is yet to come. If they have that feeling and a complaint is lodged, they will seek to, over the phone, via fax, electronic communication, try to get some more information. And then if they find there's nothing, then no violation, then they move back. But it's important to note that they are considering COVID a recordable illness. They recognize that it's going to be difficult to establish, okay, did this person really get it from here, or did it come from somewhere else when they were at home, or they took a trip to a picnic they shouldn't have. So they recognize that it's not going to be clear, black and white, such as something that deals with a normal injury or recordable that does a physical illness or a physical harm rather. So they are alleging they will be a little bit more flexible, but what you need to focus on are the bottom 2 bullet points there. Those are how OSHA said an employer should make a work-related determination if there's evidence that effectively a number of cases, so if there's several employees that start thinking it's a spread that went from one to another, it sounds like they will classify that as work-related and a recordable. Again, we're not attorneys, so you need to consult with your counsel, of course. We preferably one that's very familiar with rules in your own state, not just one from a neighboring. But then also, they also look some other evidence if you haven't taken the steps that you probably needed to. So these are the 2 major OSHA guidances that we've gotten since the last time we spoke. We'll also have links on these up on the website. And so every week, again, every Friday, we're trying to give you the latest that we've learned from the week previously. So now, John, we'll go ahead and switch over to the laws and legislation. Anything in green is already law. Anything in red is pending, noting that we might get a 3.5 phase somewhere in there.
Yeah, we don't need to go through all the various phases, except the fact that the Department of Treasury is starting to move phase 3 money out the door. We already know the Paycheck Protection Program is up and running and moving forward. $100 billion was appropriated to hospitals. Approximately 1/3 of that has gone out. And then of the $150 billion to state and local governments, roughly 40 or 50% of that money has gone out. So now we're looking at, is there going to be a phase 3.1, 3.5, or just a phase 4, which is giving more money to all these programs that previously had been appropriated. The debate right now in Washington is between Mitch McConnell and many House Republicans who say the PPP is out of money. Let's just pass a $250 billion more in PPP funding. Well, and the Republicans say there's still money have to go out for hospitals and state and local governments. When they run out of money, we'll include them in phase 4. House and Senate Democrats have a different perspective. They want the $250 billion for PPP with some additional restrictions, more of this money designated for minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses and such. But they also want an additional $250 billion for hospitals and state and local government, and that is a stalemate right now. And what we are hearing is Schumer, Pelosi, the president, and McConnell are negotiating. We just heard yesterday that it's Schumer's belief that they will get a deal this weekend, and that the Senate may vote on this new spending package on Monday. Don't know whether we're going to call it a 3.5 or a phase 4. If it includes much more than the Paycheck Protection Bill, I think it's going to be considered the phase 4, meaning phase 5. So phase 4 would be just more economic stabilization. Phase 5 would be economic stimulus. And we're hearing from McConnell and Schumer's office, the Congress has to come back to May 4th. They can pass a bill with unanimous consent, meaning everybody must agree. and that's why what this negotiation is about. But if they come back for phase 5, it's likely going to be by Memorial Day, at the very least by the end of June, but that will be the economic stimulus to make sure that there are dollars out there that the government can help provide businesses, manufacturers, and others that once the curve has gone down, that the resources are there for you to buy those raw materials to get the economy moving again. So that's where we are right now in the legislative process moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll get into more details on that in a little bit. Let's just go through some of the updates that have been issued. Again, we're trying to make this more giving you the forms, the guidance documents as they've been appearing. We know a lot of this you can read in the papers. We'll give you some more behind the scenes in a second. One thing we wanted to make you aware, among the recommendations that we made that we were successful in getting, is net operating loss on your NOL, and for you pass-throughs as well, the 80% limit was removed, and you can now take it back for 5 years in your carry forward. So I think it's important to take a look at what opportunities there are, not just from the loan program, on which we're going to spend some time here and talking about its current status and future, but really also make sure that you've got your accountants. We're not CPAs, but most accounting firms by now should be aware that you can go ahead and file an amended tax return, even if you're a pass-through. There's the link at the bottom. It's specifically for net operating loss. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your CPA. If not, reach your association. I'm sure we can find you one. But this is something that can get cash in hand quickly instead of having to wait the 90 days as you normally would under NOL. And what they're saying is you can also take a look at doing some estimates of some of your losses. And if you haven't fully figured that out, you can reconcile it on your next return. So they are trying to be flexible. And the IRS, again, just like everyone else, wants you to keep as much cash in the business as possible. We've had, so now 3 of 4 of these are.
But a key deadline is for the amendment is they want it by September 30th. So go ahead, Omar, sorry.
So what you want to be doing here, 3 of the 4 of these are new. You've already seen the Form 7200 for the employer retention credit, but keep in mind if you use that, then you can't use the 3P program, loan program, but that form still remains the same from when we provided it 2 Fridays ago. There's a new FAQ that was posted on the 16th. So yeah, yesterday morning, the IRS posted 2 more. The FAQ on payroll tax deferral, that's the one where you're going to defer half of it until December 31st of 2021, and then the other half will be due at the end of 2022. So they now have official guidance for you on that. We strongly encourage you to go through that, or at least have your accountant get a better sense and talk to your HR department on how that deferral actually will be done. Make sure you've got everything together. Again, on the employee retention credit, they did do some updates, some clarifications. Some of that is a little bit newer, so you can take a look at that one as well. And what they've done is, due to the current situation, the IRS typically requires you to do what we call a wet signature and mail in an actual paper copy. What they've done is they've issued temporary relief, so please reach out to your CPAs if you are doing amended returns. There's one form for if you're a pass-through, the other one if you're a C corporation, that will allow you to work through the IRS pretty quickly. But as John was mentioning, here's now where we are with the status of the loan. As you can tell, the top you already know by now, and those that want additional background on what's in the loan forgiveness steps, those were in the April 10th. We took it out of the slide deck just to keep it on the 30-minute timeline. But this is the data that we've got as of Tuesday night, with the 13th. We did not get any final numbers yet. Some is starting to trickle down, but you'll see on the next slide the more details. They were basically already done with this thing well before. We know that a number of you still don't have your loan either through. From our understanding, if you've got an SBA number assigned, you will get your funds. There are no more funds being approved. We'll talk about that in a second. But what they did, basically, the SBA, when they patted their own back, their own selves here, they said that they effectively gave out 14 years worth of loans in 14 days. Because as you recall, last year in 2019, the SBA gave out $29 billion worth of loans. And this is a $349 billion program that is out of cash and ran out of money in basically less than 2 weeks. But the question is, where did it go? They had 1.5 million loans that came through. Here are the numbers again through Tuesday night. So what we would suggest is just take this and extrapolate it and add on a couple of days. This is when it was at 1.03 million loans. They closed out at 1.6 million loans. So as you can see, 12% of all of them went to manufacturing businesses. Construction got the most, or among the most dollars rather, but you can see the average dollar amount for manufacturers is pretty significant that we are receiving in there. So the average size more or less is about 240,000 overall. with manufacturers getting a bit more. Again, this is through Tuesday night, not when the loan closed on Thursday. So we'll see some additional numbers, but we can say at least 75,000. It looks like manufacturers were approved for a loan, and we've got some survey stats here in a second. But I think, Paul, and your team over there, you've kind of gotten some information on what you're hearing from the loan status and what SBA is willing to do. Are they completely shut down, or what's happening there?
I mean, the people who are filing in the middle of their application should finish, but I think we're rapidly reaching the end. You know, folks who are having questions always can email us at the One Voice. If you look on the One Voice website information page, it's onevoice@policyres.com. But we're still getting reports, at least among our members and clients, of folks receiving their loans if they've got it in and if they've got their paperwork in, but you know, the window's rapidly closing.
Yeah, it is. So,
no more. So the SBA lenders can no longer load any new loans onto the SBA site. However, if you are in the process of getting this loan application done, continue that process with your lender. Make sure you have the paperwork done so that when this program does open up again, you will be first in line. Because one of the challenges with this is a first come first serve program. And so as soon as this thing opens up, and it may be as soon as early next week, that you want to have your ducks in a row and have your paperwork in so that your lender can immediately, when the spigot gets turned on, they can submit your application.
Right. So keep going, keep working through the process. Again, to that point, you cannot submit anything new, but you should still be working with your lender about collecting what other information, get your latest 941s, your 1099 miscellaneous, anything else that you've got. Make sure you've got it all over there and ready to go. Because, you know, as John said, we are looking at, my personal gut tells me, yes, we are going to get another bill at some point. And I think that in the process, you are going to probably get some concessions. The Democrats believe that their leverage is increased with the 3P program out of funds. It may sound brutal and harsh, but they're correct, because this is the president is still in charge. So regardless, theoretically, he'll get more of the blame than a mixed matchup on Capitol Hill. And so that's why they want to be able to use this time and leverage, because they don't know when they're going to have another opportunity. As John mentioned, they're looking at not coming back till early May, if then. And any member of Congress can object, and if they do so, then everything will effectively be shut down, and they've got to bring people in for a vote, which is unlikely to be done. So where do we stand? I think we'll see a little bit more progress through the weekend. The U.S. House is in a little bit today, but Senate is gone right now as well. So what we are hearing is they'll work through the weekend. Our gut tells us sometime in the next 48 hours, we'll get a sense of where we might be, and then early next week, we will then be able to hopefully report back on our next call that they'll be moving forward with this. So they're thinking right now that 200.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're looking at $251 billion is apparently the number that Marco Rubio wants as the baseline. The Democrats, though, want to plus that up and get it to closer to $500 billion. That's why it'll have set-asides for minorities, women lenders, small banks, and that's a lot of where the Democrats' position is. Again, there will be another bill later on, but this is right now, we've got to get this turned back on. This is not right now. We're also hearing it'll probably take care of, we got a question just now about, is the emergency injury disaster loan, the EIDL at SBA, is that out of money yet? So what we're also hearing is that there will be additional round of funding, hopefully for that in this next bill. The EIDL is separate from the 3P programs. What it does, it was provided $17 billion to allow for up to $2 million in loans. Anything over 25% will be collateralized, and it is not forgiven. However, they had 4 million people request an EIDL loan, 4 million companies, and that total was $379 billion worth of requests, or 376. So what they're now doing, what we're hearing is they're reducing the EIDL, and they are calculating that and giving you an average of 25 to 35,000. And they're saying the 10,000 they promised you within 2 days is going to be up to 10,000 based on employee, 1,000 for each employee. So I wouldn't entirely hold your breath for any big dollars coming out of that one as well, because it's clearly been, the system has been overwhelmed, and that's our understanding.
One of our concerns is, as Omar mentioned, the game plan is to add additional $251 billion into the PPP program. But remember what Omar just said. We just spent $349 billion in basically 10 days, in 2 weeks. And our concern is that $250 billion, because this program has been so successful, has been so popular, that that $250 billion may go away in a week. And so we may be doing this all again moving forward. One bank trade association executive, in commenting about how successful the PPP program is, was estimating that he thinks this program is going to need a total of $1 trillion. And so that is concern. That is why we are urging you, if you haven't applied yet, to make sure that you have your ducks in a row, so that when they turn the lights back on, that you're first in line.
So let's talk a little bit about what our members are hearing right now. And this is a survey that we've put out. We talked about what do we want in our bill, in our next bill. And so what we're hearing from you all, we put out a survey to both associations' memberships. We had 190 responses on most questions. Some dropped to 172, but most questions at 190. This is what you told us you would like us to lobby on. And so we did pretty well in the last round. We had 8 out of 10 of the provisions we sought, and a couple were throwaway. We were able to secure those. So again, this is what you told us you want. Another round of 3P loan programs for small businesses. So that is something on which we are obviously currently lobbying, and will continue to move forward. What we're also, again, looking to switch from a payroll tax deferral to a payroll tax holiday. That ranked number 2 is what our members told us. The way to read these things, they are obviously ranked in order of priority, but you want to always look at who ranked it. How many ranks for number 1 priority did you get? So that tells us you got 79 out of 190 responses ranked the 3P program as their top priority. That's by far more than double that are out there for anything else. So that's why we're probably, and we will focus most of our efforts there. But also number 3 came in, liability protection for employers. It's interesting, that one came in last actually on another association for which we had a word for word survey, and you all had it number 3. Again, this is combined for those that are asking. I think it was somewhere around 60% NTMA responses and just under 40% PMA, with the rest being a combination of both memberships. But again, you'll see this is sort of the list that we've put in. The choices here were developed based on feedback that you all have provided us over the previous several weeks. Then we had a comment box and we've collected all those. We will be making the full survey available, and what we'll be able to do is from then you all can see what some of your peers are doing. Obviously it's all anonymous. None of us have access to who filled it out. Here's what you all are telling us. This is something that John wanted
to do. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah. We received a call today from a member of Congress who's looking at introducing a bill that would provide a 50% tax credit for employers that provide hazard pay or bonuses during this COVID situation, during this pandemic. His point is he is hearing from employees who are worried about coming to work because of the virus. And so to incentivize these employees to come back to work, if some employers are providing hazard pay, bonus pay, and he's hearing more and more of that. And so if employers are doing that, his view is they should be rewarded in providing a 50% tax credit. So this just came in today. As we proceed through this, feel free to comment, let Omar and I know that this is a yay or nay, that this is a lobbying effort that we may add to the list, or maybe not. So the member of Congress has asked us to see if this would be beneficial to the membership of PMA and NTMA.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we don't ever want to raise expectations. It's a very, very long way away, and we'd have to see how the IRS would respond. So again, yes, we'll take your feedback, but keep in mind it's a long ways away from a reality. So we want to manage expectations whenever we're talking about things. And so let's take a look at where we are on the survey here. What you all told us in terms of your current operating status. You are about, this number dropped again. This survey was in the field from Monday and it closed on Wednesday. So it was the 48 hours in the first half of the week. At that point, early in the week, you're at around 62, 64% were still operating, and we finally settled in when we closed the survey on Wednesday evening at 56%. What we're concerned about here, and this is why John rightly brought this up last week, was with regards to how many employees are just working on backlog. And when you're looking at that backlog, is how are we going to be calculating that, and when does that backlog start to dry up? And that is our concern, is over the next couple of weeks is we might be seeing another wave of either people going and laying off or getting put on furloughs for that reason. So we are trying to get a better sense of where your peers are. This is what they tell us. And then again, here's where some of our issues stand in terms of the loan awarded. This was a question that we received a little bit ago. How many of your peers have received actual loans? Again, this was taken Monday through Wednesday. So we'll probably put another survey out. I think John and I will probably want to do one here in a couple of weeks to see where things are. But you can see loans awarded, 10% had actual cash in hand. It's still awaiting funds. So let's just argue that a little over 2/3 of our members at the time of this closed on Wednesday were still, had been awarded, and another half had been awaiting approval. So effectively, that tells us that 90% of our members requested a loan or were in the process of doing so, and that about half of them had gotten some kind of a determination. And so that tells us the nature of where we think we are. We also asked the question of what are you doing with the loan? Obviously, it's qualified uses only, but we think it's important, and this validates that it does seem like the loan program that we lobbied for, one of our recommendations was a 2-year loan program, and it does seem that 2/3 of you are telling that it looks good. But John, this is the question that you asked last time. Actively receiving new orders at normal levels is only at 6%. And then looking at backlogs, so the backlogs and just doing repair is down to almost 20.
Yeah, and 72% are well below. That's not a surprise to any of us. But if you add that 72% who are well below, and then the 16% who basically are just doing that backlog, we are concerned moving forward in the next week or two that numbers of manufacturers who are engaging in manufacturing is going to go very high, which is critically important. Why this PPP program needs to be reauthorized. So that employers can utilize that to keep employees on the payroll.
Yeah, and I would only add that PMA issued its monthly business conditions report, and not surprisingly, which looks at the next 3 months, and had the sharpest drop in forecasting and a bunch of categories, from new orders and so forth since they started doing the survey 40 years ago. So again, not surprising, but it just gives you the data just gives you an idea of the impact. So we, while the data is pretty grim, but we want to hear. We know that many members are doing great things out there, and while a lot of folks don't like to toot their own horns, we want to toot them for you. So we are collecting. Information on those folks who are converting their shop or just doing good things for the community. An NTMA member had an interview with major media this week, as well as a PMA member. So we want to hear from you, and we're going to both. We're getting a great number of media inquiries about what folks are doing on the charitable side, but also how your businesses are going. So we want to hear from you. Please feel free to contact Caitlin or myself, or use the contact information we have on the One Voice site. That's onevoice@policyres.com, and we will help get your story out there. As I said, we know you don't like to toot your own horns, but we want to do it for you. We're also going to follow us on Twitter and other social media platforms, your trade associations, and we're going to start promoting what you're all doing out there. And as always, our resource page is www.onevoiceinfo.org. It is updated pretty much every single day. So please check back there and let us know if you, and after you go on there, you can always contact us with questions. And then we're doing a podcast. We're going to do one right after this. If you haven't gotten enough of us on this webinar, there will be a new episode up later today. So wherever you get your podcast, pull down Talking with One Voice. We will, that has Omar and John on it, and Kaylin and myself, and we'll give you the latest information. I think we're going to questions now.
We'll go ahead and take it from the top. There's a number of questions that we've got in there. The first one on when are they adding more 3P loan funding? And I think we've discussed that hopefully in the next few days to see when that comes out. We addressed now the loan forgiveness. So we've got a couple of things. We suggest that take a look at the guidance that has been put together on loan forgiveness in the PowerPoint last week. We've got a slide just on what's permitted on that. Is there going to be an extension on the 8-week period to use up payroll to claim forgiveness? From what we understand, the answer right now is that no, the 8-week period, that was the question, the 8-week period begins at the time of first disbursement, and that's when the clock goes. So that's when you turn in your paperwork later on that you show your payroll, your utilities, your mortgage interest and rent. Those will be presented to your lender when they petition the SBA to have the loan forgiven. Remember, it's not automatically forgiven. You're going to have to provide documentation, and they identify the category since you could only have certain items classified as allowing them to be forgiven. So you'll take a look at, you'll want to take a look at that. Also on the forgiveness, so the reason that we don't have additional guidance from the Treasury or SBA on that right now is because, frankly, to be honest, the government thinks they got 8 more weeks. Well, 7 weeks if you got it, your disbursement last week. So right now, there's only 2,000 people that work at the Department of Treasury, which doesn't sound like much, and it isn't for a government entity. So they're working through that. We expect further guidance. I didn't hear it was coming next week, but likely will be probably around week 4 of this is our understanding. So no, we do not have official guidance on the forgiveness process, and the lenders right now have been told that 60 days is when you got to get it back out, and add that as well. Looking at if the next stimulus is extending past 2.5 months, will companies approved in the first round be eligible for the second round? That's a good question right now, and we have raised that with staff. Our understanding so far is that no, they're not going to likely allow you to request another one. It's in the initial CARES Act statute that you cannot have 2 loans under this program, but we would argue that in a phase 4, not in a 3.5, that they would probably or possibly say, okay, things have not reopened after 2.5 months, and we have to look at allowing folks to reapply and have it again. So we are not hearing that certainly in the 3.5 because there's still so many people that have not gotten their first batch, but most likely that we could potentially see that happening down in the later one as you get to an additional guidance there. Another question we received was, has a decision been made on companies with foreign ownership? There are the restrictions with regards to the Main Street Lending Program with regards to foreign ownership under the 3P program. The only guidance that we've seen so far still remains that you cannot use the 3P program to pay the salaries or payroll costs of an individual whose primary residence is not in the United States. What they have been doing, and this has caught a couple of our members, is they're using the affiliation rule to count the number of employees the foreign affiliates have as well. So if you're owned by a German company, say, that's got a number of other businesses under their umbrella, yes, the SBA is going to count those employees in the other, whether it's in the United States or overseas, and that's what's getting people knocked out under the foreign provision, but we have not seen anything formal come in yet saying, no, if you're foreign owned. That has not come in the latest, and the latest guidance we got from Treasury was on tax day on Wednesday, April 15th. Question that came in about reshoring and whether or not there's discussions on that. As you all saw, we are pushing, and you all just got an action alert from us a few moments ago that does discuss the onshoring activities and trying to get a tax credit. Yes, there are some discussions. They have not issued the executive order yet. We understand the White House is looking at one, but more likely for the onshoring, it would be focused more on medical devices and supplies. We have not gotten the language yet, but we were just trading emails with someone that's also talking to the White House on Thursday. And some of you know the Coalition for Prosperous America. So we've been talking to those folks as well and trying to coordinate on domestic supply chains. So we hopefully will get some more information the next week of where some of that is going. On the accounts receivable, we got a couple of questions on that one. And we were surprised, honestly, that it came down as low as it did in our survey. During the Great Recession, we did work towards trying to create an accounts receivable insurance program. We know for some folks that is very important. We're going to continue to push that, but we haven't seen that catch on quite as much as, at least with our members, that we thought it would. So we'll get a better sense, hopefully, on if that's something that could be into the phase 4 or so. A couple questions on the Main Street Lending Program and the Federal Reserve. John went through some of that last week. They have not issued guidance from the Fed. I think that we checked on Wednesday, we'll double check again, but have not seen any further guidance from the Federal Reserve Bank and those folks on it. And they were expected to do so shortly. We thought it was going to be this week, but I had not seen it yet. So we don't have an official portal that's open for those that are 500 or over that's out there as well. If the employer is U.S. owned and has employees overseas, the headcount is just for U.S. or determined under 500. It's all affiliates that you look at. If you've got a 20% or more ownership is how it looks, and then that's how they'll count it. So if you've got an affiliate with an ownership of your company, the one that's actually requesting the loan, that's how they're calculating the 500 employees. So you have to look at the ownership structure and how that is, and then take a look at whether or not you count towards the 500 or not in terms of the other entities owning 20% of the one that is requesting the loan that's there. If we pay rent or healthcare in advance during the 8-week period, will it qualify for forgiveness? The way we'll get clarity on that one, and maybe Bracewell can recall, but I believe the way that it was written, it's for the costs that were incurred in that 8-week period. So the prepayment, that might be a tricky one. We might need to submit that one as a question to see how it goes, because my gut tells me if you look at the letter of the law, it would tell you it's for costs that are incurred during that period. But if you look at the spirit of the law, that would probably make sense that they would want that part covered. So
Yeah, we'll submit that to our legal side and get back to them.
yeah, and I'm not sure that they would have their number from there, but we'll take a look. One question came in. We have a 4-digit number from our bank. Could that be the SBA number? Are they longer? That's something that honestly we haven't requested a loan, so I couldn't tell you offhand. Maybe one of the colleagues could respond and saying that that they have not put it in, or not. There might be a longer number there, so we'll double check and try to get back to that person as well. Let's see, questions 5 and 6. The current partner has not been employed since 2016, so we had a question about a loan. We'll reach out to that person, because I think it's a little bit more of a unique case with regards to the 20% interest. They did, under the affiliation rule, there are a couple of clarifications. For SBA, you have to keep in mind, there is what we call a CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, that they comply with, and so those are in addition to the guidance that they put out that's on the SBA website. So we can work to answer that question as well. Actual cost based on cash or accrual, they're going to look at the payments that you've made. So at the end of your 8 weeks for forgiveness, they're going to request your lender. They're going to want your paychecks, or whoever runs your payroll. They're going to want to pull all your documents of what you actually paid out during that period. So our understanding is the documentation they're going to review is going to be based on what was paid out. So that's why they're going to look at the 8 weeks and you submit that to them then. We mentioned that we send out an action alert if we were provided lists by both associations, in fact, yesterday, so those should have been uploaded there. If you did not receive it, we'll double check. Make sure we encourage you all to, if you did not receive it, you can just log on to metalworkingadvocate.org and sign on to it via action alerts, and then provide and get the message out to your membership, or excuse me, out to your members of Congress that we need to make sure that we've got the 3P program that's funded and that we are up and running with a number of other priorities that are out there. I know we're running a little bit long. Any other questions that are out there? Again, this is being recorded. Nope. Okay. Thanks, everyone. As always, this is being recorded and it will be sent out to everybody this afternoon, and it will be posted onto the info, onevoiceinfo.org website under webinars. So please continue to contact us. We'll try to keep this brief and keep it updated every week, and we'll talk to everybody next Friday at noon Eastern. Thank you so much.